Hey guys, it's Spees. Now, I saw a video on YouTube and it was called Help Me Understand Mythic Content in World of Warcraft. The video was about a man, an older gentleman. He's been playing WoW since Vanilla and Classic, on and off in the 18 years WoW has been out. He plays it with his sons. He's pretty casual at the game. They play when the game's interesting to them, or life comes along, they fall out of the game. They don't play for a little bit. They take breaks from WoW. But he's playing again in Shadowlands, maybe kind of hyped for Dragonflight to come out, and he just has max level characters in Shadowlands, and he hears people talking about mythic dungeons. And he has no idea what they are, and he's kind of too afraid to ask because he's been playing the game for 18 years. And it just kind of slipped through him. He wasn't interested in 5-man dungeons. And he doesn't know what mythic dungeons are in WoW. And I will admit to him, to this gentleman, the game itself does not explain to you really what a mythic plus dungeon is, or mythic dungeons are, or at least the different levels of difficulty of dungeons. It kind of just throws you in there and just goes, good luck. So if you don't know, and you might be too afraid to ask, you will just never know. But I've watched other videos on this guy's channel. He now understands the idea behind Mythics and Mythic Plus dungeons, and he's actually uploaded some videos of doing +2 and +3. So good for him. He figured it out. People on YouTube helped him. But I wanted to make a video to explain to other people what a Mythic dungeon is. So, this is for new players to WoW. If you know what Mythic and Mythic Plus dungeons are, this video is not for you. But please, like and subscribe. Share this to new players to WoW so they can learn the different levels of difficulty of dungeons in WoW. So anyways, when you're doing WoW, when you're playing WoW, you can do what is called 5-man dungeons. So as you level up in WoW, you could decide to do dungeons. And you know what a dungeon is, that if you look on the map here, let me just find a zone that I know has a dungeon in it. Southern Barrens. If you look on the map, you'll see these blue swirly portals, and that's an entrance to a dungeon. This zone actually has 3 dungeons. Now the idea is, back in old WoW, Vanilla and Classic WoW, you had to make a group, you had to go to the actual dungeon entrance, you walk into the dungeon entrance, you do the dungeon as a group. But in modern WoW, they added some quality of life changes. As you're leveling up, you can use what's called the group finder here. Down here in the lower right hand corner, or just the I button on your keyboard, brings up this dungeon and raid group finder. It will already have dungeon finder selected. And you can just say, hey, I just want to do a random dungeon. When you're leveling up, this might say something different than Shadowlands, but random dungeons or normal dungeons. And you can just say, hey, then up here you can click what you want to do in the dungeon. Now, if you're a new player and you don't know, 5-man dungeons go in with 1 tank, 1 healer, and 3 DPS. Tank is the one that runs in and makes sure all the mobs are hitting them and not everyone else. Healers heal everyone up. They make sure everyone stays alive. And the damage dealers just deal damage and kill everything. So just figure out what you want to do. I will say, if you're a new player, you don't want to be the tank, because everyone's just going to assume the tank knows what they're doing, knows the way through the dungeon, what to pull, what not to pull. So if you're new to the game, I wouldn't go in as a tank. I would either be a damage dealer or a healer and just follow where the tank's going and just learn what they're pulling and why. But anyways, the idea behind normal dungeons while you're leveling up is it takes people from all different levels. You can go into a dungeon at level 15 and it might pair you up with like level 20, 30, 40 people. Don't be intimidated by that. Through the magic of the game of WoW, it somehow scales people's damage up if you're lower level, so everyone can contribute the same no matter what your level. But the bosses will only drop items just for your level, and it will drop. And if a piece of loot drops for someone else, it will be for their level. And the idea is, as you're leveling up, normal dungeons are the easiest. It will scale people up if you're a lower level. And you can just get through the dungeons, and they're not supposed to be too hard on normal difficulty. Now, once you reach the max level, right now in Shadowlands it's level 60. Once Dragonflight releases in a couple weeks, the max level will be 70. You unlock what is called heroic dungeons. Now, once again, you could make a group and walk into the dungeon portal if you want to do heroics. But you can just still use the dungeon finder again and just say, I want to do a heroic dungeon instead. The game will say your gear has to be a certain level before you can go into a heroic dungeon, or it won't let you use the system. You can get better gear at max level by doing normal dungeons, or have someone craft you gear, or maybe even doing some quests. But get your gear high enough to do a random to use the group finder here to go into a heroic dungeon. And once again, just say if you want to be a tank, healer, or damage dealer, and it will port you into the dungeon. It teleports you there, and you can use this system. So you don't have to walk there. Quality of life thing. Heroic dungeons are harder than normal dungeons. They expect everyone to be max level and have a certain level of gear, by doing normal dungeons or doing quests at max level. So they are going to be harder than normal dungeons. But they drop better gear than the heroic dungeons. Now, a level above that is mythic dungeons. The thing with mythic dungeons is you can't use the dungeon finder tool for mythic. If you look here, I don't have anything that says anything about mythic dungeons. Mythic dungeons, you do actually have to make your own group and walk to the dungeon portal in the world. Mythic dungeons. Now, before I go more deep into mythic dungeons, I should mention in the group finder tool, you can go down here to this third tab, the pre-made groups, go to dungeons, say find a group, and you'll see here a list of people who want to do a certain dungeon on a certain level. And I can change it between a heroic, mythic, or mythic plus. So if you want to, you can use this to find random people in the world. And I can just say, hey, I want to do this dungeon. I'll sign up. They'll ask me what I want to be. I tell them I want to be a healer. And they can decide if they want to take me or not. So you can use the dungeon, the group finder tool to find people to do mythic dungeons. You don't have to sit in town and yell, hey, use the chat to be like, hey, healer looking for a dungeon. A lot of people now in modern WoW use the pre-made group thing to find groups. But anyways, like I said, you have to get your own group together. You actually have to go to the dungeons. Mythic will actually be harder, obviously, than heroic level dungeons. But on top of that, some of the bosses and maybe even enemies in the dungeons will have new moves on top of all the moves they have in heroic mode. So be aware of that. A boss might do something completely different than what you saw on heroic mode, something new, and usually a lot more deadly than just regular heroic. So just be aware that when you go into a mythic dungeon, bosses or maybe even regular enemies in the dungeons might have new abilities that you did not see in heroic, and they're usually harder. With a mythic dungeon, once you kill a boss the first time a week, he'll either drop loot for you or not, and then you get one shot a week for getting loot from that boss. You can join other people's groups and run a mythic again, but just that boss will not drop gear for you, nor can anyone trade you gear that they got from that boss if you've already killed the boss. So just know, once you go on Mythic, one chance a week to get gear from bosses. Once you complete your first Mythic 5-man dungeon. At the end of the dungeon, you'll get something what's called a mythic keystone. Now, my druid should have one here somewhere in his inventory. And the craziness of my inventory. So, just imagine when you're going into a dungeon and you're doing a mythic that is level 1. At the end of the dungeon, you'll get what's called a mythic keystone. And it will say, this is a mythic keystone level 2 for a random dungeon. And now you can do that dungeon on level 2, whatever it says. Now, if you look at here, mine says Grimrail Depot, level 18. So, the keystones can go up in levels. The idea is, every time you go up a level, all the enemies get plus 8% damage and health. So, at level 2, they get plus 8% damage and health. At level 18, it's whatever 18 times 8 is. That is a really big number. But the idea is, as the levels go up, everything gets harder. And also, as you go up in levels, it's going to start adding these little what's called dungeon modifiers. You can see here, at level 2, it adds either tyrannical or fortified. It's tyrannical this week. Level 4, it's adding bolstering. Level 7, it's adding something called explosive. And at level 10, it adds even another thing. And these are just more... what's the best word? It's just something you have to watch out for on top of everything else in the dungeon. Tyrannical means the bosses have more health and more damage on top of that 8% every time you go up a level. And fortified means all the non-bosses enemies have, I think it's plus 25% more health and damage on top of that 8% that goes up every level. And that switches every week. And it's just a way to mix up the dungeons. And then they add other things like... I lost where my keystone is. And I've also lost my train of thought. But the idea here is it's just a way to make the dungeons different every week. And you can make it as hard or as difficult as you want. Now, usually around the max level people do, have ever done, is around level 30. 15 is usually the highest everyone wants to shoot for. Why level 15? One thing I didn't explain is, once you do a level 2 dungeon drops better loot than a regular mythic dungeon. Level 3, or level 5 will drop better than a 2. It's not every level it goes up. It might be every 2 or 3 levels you go up, the gear's just a little bit better. The gear doesn't drop from the bosses. The gear drops from a treasure chest at the end of the dungeon. It's usually 2 pieces of gear, but the higher level you go, or if you complete it in time, you get more gear. Now you might just say, wait, you just said complete it in time. Another thing different about Mythic plus Dungeon is they give you a timer to beat the dungeon in. If you do not beat the dungeon in time, the idea is your keystone won't go up a level. It will actually go down a level. And then the gear at the end might not be as well, I think, sometimes. Don't get bent out of shape about the time thing, though. At really low levels, +2, +5, +8, the time is not really that difficult to beat. It only gets hard once you're going up into level 15 dungeons, level 20 dungeons. Think about it. At a level 20 dungeon, everything has plus 160% more damage and health. That's a lot. Plus all the other modifiers you're dealing with. It's just something that people can challenge themselves. It's a way to make the dungeons harder. And every week the modifiers change to just make the dungeons a little different every week. It's just a way to keep the 5-man dungeons unique and different every week. And don't get stale real quick. Back in an original WoW, dungeons had 1 difficulty, and then you can outgear them really quickly. And then they kind of got stale, and then no one ever did dungeons anymore. This makes it so dungeons are always a way to do something in the game. At the start of the expansion, level doing a +5, a +10, a +15, depending on how hard you play the game, how hardcore casual you are. Those might be like doing a level 5. If you're really casual, you might be like, holy crap, a level +5 Mythic Plus dungeon is hard for me. But as you get better gear, a level 5 won't be as hard for you. You might be like, I'm going to try a level 7, level 8, a level 10. It's just a way for people to challenge themselves. Don't feel intimidated by them. A lot of people just go, oh God, I don't want to do Mythic Plus because I'm going to ruin it for other people. Kind of have to get over that fear and just find what level is comfortable for you. If you just want to do, you don't even have to touch Mythic Plus if you're that casual. As you can see, my Keystone's level 18, so I do like to push myself a little harder. But that's the beauty of it. You can make the Mythic Plus dungeons as hard or as easy as you want them to be. And it's always fun to make your own 5-man group and see how hard you and your friends can push it. Can you break the 20 barrier? Now, I will say with the gear, the best gear drops from level 15, at least for now in the game. I think in Dragonflight they're changing it to 20. If you do beat a dungeon right now at level 20, it gives you a teleport to the dungeon. So there is, rewards up to level 20. But past level 20, it's just bragging rights at that point. You get the achievement called Keystone Master for doing everything on about a level 15. But that's the idea about Mythic Plus dungeons. You can make them as hard or as easy as you want them to be. And it's just there throughout the expansion to keep 5-man dungeons relevant. So I hope that video explained to everyone what the different levels of dungeons are. And hopefully people aren't as confused after they watch this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.